the best of it is that our time initially, when the whole thing was opening up, was there were no charts, there were no maps.
Robert Plant made a choice in 1980 that cost him $800 million. Fans still don't know the real reason he turned down the biggest offer in music history, but making that choice was the start of a life full of lies. Having an affair with the sister of his ex-wife, which is illegal. A kid that he doesn't talk about much. He has also lost everyone he has ever loved. She is now 77 years old and lives alone. Her memories are too painful to share. The rock star's life isn't just sad right now, it's almost hard to believe. Robert Plant grew up in a world that got better and worse over time. He had a civil engineer father named Robert C. Plant, who had worked on big projects like making runways during World War II. The family lived in West Bromwich to be comfortable like a middle-class family, but they weren't really home there. Things got really tense because his mother, Annie Celia Kane, was Romany. Plant's background gave him a sense of magic, myth, and the restless spirit of someone who doesn't belong. It was very different from his father's world of plans and buildings, which was very organized. The name Black Country comes from the soot and smoke that filled the air from factories. Life in the Black Country was hard and gray. His mother's family history opened up a new world to him, full of color and imagination. This world influenced his songs, which now have myth and magic themes. Being stuck between those two worlds as a child was the hardest thing about his early years. The fights with his parents got harder to avoid as he grew up. In post-war Britain, becoming a chartered accountant was seen as the highest level of professional honor. His father hoped that he would take a safe road and become one. As someone who had worked hard to get where they were, Robert C. Plant was very upset at the thought of his son giving up on this dream. But Robert had already found something else that kept him busy all the time. The blues, with its raw power and honest emotions, had been introduced to him by singers such as Howlin' Wolf, Muddy Waters, and Sonny Boy Williamson II. He could feel the pain and desire in the music, even though he had grown up far from the world it talked about. He bought rare foreign records with his allowance at a store in Birmingham called the Diskery. He then locked himself in his room to listen to every sound. It wasn't just music that affected him. It was also a way of life that didn't fit with the safe and quiet life his parents liked. In the year he turned 16, he was going to King Edward VI Grammar School in Stourbridge. This was a big deal for his family because it meant he would be able to go to college and have a good life. But Robert felt stuck. Compared to the powerful pull of the blues, the subjects he had to learn, like Latin and math, seemed pointless. He put it himself, "I'm a square peg in a round hole." He made the brave choice to quit school when he was 16 and only had a few GCEO passes. They didn't think it was just a mistake, but an outright lie about everything they had worked for. He thought it was the only way to move forward. He wasn't just leaving school, he was leaving the life they had planned for him behind. Soon after, things got too tense at home and broke. Robert left for good when he was only 16. It wasn't a big adventure, it was a hard and unsure time. He slept on the floors of friends' homes because he had no money and nowhere to go. He was always moving, living the kind of life he used to admire in the blues musicians he loved. His girlfriend, Maureen Wilson, who was a little older than him, helped him out financially and emotionally. They finally moved in together in a small apartment in Walsall. She took care of him while he pursued what seemed like an impossible dream. They didn't talk to him much between 1964 and 1966. He had to do hard manual work to make money. The hardest job he had was laying tarmac for the construction company Wimpy in the West Midlands. The hard work made him tougher and gave him the grit that would show in his voice later on. Even though these jobs were very hard on him, he spent his nights listening to music. In 1966, he joined a group that helped him achieve his first real happiness. It was called the Band of Joy, and people in Birmingham and the Black Country soon heard about it. John Bonham was the drummer in the band. His powerful playing went well with Robert's high, wild singing in a way that felt electric. They made a sound together that sounded like a sign of something much bigger. Robert was on stage. His big, dramatic face and long blonde hair won him the name Wild Man of Blues from people in the Black Country. Robert stood out as someone who wasn't like anyone else in the Band of Joy. The band worked hard, but they never got a record deal and didn't make much money. They played in clubs and pubs that were packed, but they were only paid in beer money most of the time. It was a time of growth, but also a lot of anger. Everything changed by the summer of 1968. Jimmy Page, the great guitarist for the Yardbirds, had a problem. His band had broken up in July, but he still had tour contracts worth about $30,000 in the US and Scandinavia. He could lose all of his money if he couldn't find a new group quickly. Reed, who was his first choice for a singer, turned him down, but Reed suggested Robert Plant instead. Robert, who was only 20, was barely making it at the time, making about $20 a week. Page didn't just meet him for fun. He was looking for someone desperately who could help him stay out of debt and the public eye. It took Page 120 miles to get from London to a teacher training college in Birmingham on July 31st, 1968, to see Robert play with the little-known band Hobbs Tweedle in front of a small crowd. The way Robert played that night shocked him. He sang blues standards and "Somebody to Love" by Jefferson Airplane with a voice that went up and down 4 octaves. He moved in a way that Page had never seen anyone else move. On stage, Robert had a strange, almost magical force. Page later said, he thought there must be something wrong with him because if there wasn't, a big band would have signed him by now. But the truth was that London bands had turned down Robert because he was too heavy or too weird for the masses. Page knew that night that he had found someone special. Robert went to see Page at his Victorian wharf in Pangbourne the very next day. Over the course of the night, the house became filled with books about the occult, rugs from the Middle Ages and art from the East. Robert had brought rare American blues records with him, like Skip James's recordings and the entire works of Robert Johnson. These records matched Page's own collection. They talked about songs and ideas until 4 in the morning. Robert's voice was so strong when they sang "Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You" at one point that it seemed to shake the wooden walls of the house. By dawn, they had planned out the first parts of songs that would go on to make millions of dollars, like "Dazed and Confused" and "Communication Breakdown." Now that Robert was on board, Page set out to finish the band. Robert recommended that John Bonham, who was working with Tim Rose and making $40 a week at the time, be brought in. When Bonham played his bass drum, it was so loud that some places wouldn't let him in because it would break walls. Page gave him $25 to just try out, which was almost twice as much as he was making before. It worked. John Paul Jones, a session drummer who has worked with the Rolling Stones and Donovan, joined them to round out the group. Jones had gone to the Royal College of Music and was very good at playing many instruments. He was a session player and made more money by 1967 than many full-time rock stars. This new group came together in just 3 weeks. Each member brought unique skills, but they all made less than $150 a week combined. They were ready to go by September 1968. After being sued by former Yardbirds bassist Chris Drestier, they had to change their name from the New Yardbirds to something else. As a joke, Keith Moon and John Entwistle of the band The Who said that Page's new band would fail like a lead balloon. This is where the new name came from. Page liked the word, but he changed the spelling to Led Zeppelin. He thought it said everything about the band that he wanted it to stand for: weight and lightness, power and beauty. Their first record, released in 1969, did not just make it to the top of the charts. It came out of nowhere and changed rock music forever. After only a few months together, the band was selling more albums than big-name acts and creating the sound that would later define heavy metal. It was by chance that Jimmy Page met Robert Plant. He heard him sing "Somebody to Love" at a college in Birmingham. He knew right away that Plant's voice was different from everyone else's. Plant's high notes, deep growls, and raw wails on that first album gave the music a power that no one had heard before. Some bands like Black Sabbath, Judas Priest, and Iron Maiden got their start from that event. By the time their first world tour was over, Led Zeppelin were already known as the new rock giants. They changed the course of music forever. Robert Plant was at the center of this rise. His performance on stage made a picture that fans would never forget. He was called the Golden God because his long blonde hair fell over his bare chest and he stood tall and sure of himself. He did more than sing. He was always on the move, snapping his fingers, throwing his head back, and making dramatic poses that made every show unforgettable. The way he looked became a sign of rock. In 1974, a music magazine gave him the Strange Chestorama Award because it thought he had the best chest in rock. Plant laughed about it later and said he felt pleased but didn't know what to say about his chest. His bright shirts, tight pants, and jewelry that sparkled made him look even better. Many other frontmen, from Mick Jagger to Jim Morrison, copied the style he made and shed light on what it meant to be a rock star. Led Zeppelin IV, which came out in 1971, cemented their place in history. It went on to sell more than 37 million copies around the world, making it one of the best-selling records ever. A big part of it was the song Stairway to Heaven, which is over 8 minutes long but is still one of the most famous rock songs ever. Fans bought the whole record just to hear it, even though the band wouldn't put it out as a single. It went 24 times silver in the US alone, which means that more than 24 million copies were sold. The number hit 38 million around the world. As their fame grew, Plant's domestic life also changed. The wedding took place on November 9, 1968, and she was with him. Their wedding reception was at London's Roundhouse, which is also where the newly formed band Led Zeppelin played, making it one of the most exclusive music debuts you can imagine. Plant first met Maureen at a Georgie Fame show in 1966. She stayed in his life even as he went from playing in small places to becoming famous all over the world. He even wrote their second album's song, Thank You for Her. They had 3 kids together, and Maureen kept the house stable while Plant was on tour. In those early years, Plant's marriage gave him a rare sense of normalcy in the crazy world of rock stardom. Life on the road wasn't always smooth, though. The so-called Mud Shark incident happened at Seattle's Edgewater Inn in July 1969. Vanilla Fudge's Carmine Appice said that members of Led Zeppelin and Vanilla Fudge had a shocking experience with a 17-year-old fan and a fish pulled from the bay. He later confirmed this in his autobiography. When Frank Zappa told the story again in a live record in 1971, it got more attention. People thought it was a lie for a long time, but when it was proven true years later, it became one of the craziest stories in rock history. The event took place during Zeppelin's first big US tour, which made it even stranger since the band was still trying to build a serious reputation. Plant's own thoughts on the wild lifestyle of rock changed over time. By 1975, he was upset about the younger and younger girls getting involved in the growing groupie scene in Los Angeles. In the song Sick Again, he wrote about this, where he talked about how sad and angry he was. He said in interviews that he was getting bored with the scene and that things that used to be interesting now seemed shallow and wrong. By the mid-1980s, he freely called the life of a rock star shabby and mean-spirited. This showed how far he had come from the excess that was a big part of Zeppelin's image. Plant also gave Led Zeppelin's music a depth that a lot of people didn't expect. He used his love of books and myths in his lyrics, often taking ideas from J.R.R. Tolkien and Norse stories. Mordor was mentioned in songs like Ramble On, and Tolkien's world was used a lot in The Battle of Evermore, with images that fans directly connected to characters like Frodo and Galadriel. In songs like Immigrant Song, he also used Norse tales, where he sang about Valhalla and Viking victories. Zeppelin's music was different from other bands because of how rich and complicated it was because of this. During their shows at Madison Square Garden in 1973, the band had to deal with one of rock's biggest secrets. Around 1:10 a.m. and 7:30 p.m., their safe deposit box at the Drake Hotel was broken into on July 29th, and about $200,000 in cash was taken. The money they had was from the shows they had played. When Richard Cole, the tour manager, went to pay the film crew, he found only IDs in the box, which meant someone had stolen it. The NYPD did a full investigation and wrote a thorough report, but the money was never found, and no one was caught. The theft is still known as one of the worst in rock history. It was even talked about in The Song Remains the Same, the band's performance film. Another big change was Plant's growth as a musician. In the beginning, his songs were often called too simple and repeated. But by the time Led Zeppelin III came out in 1970, he had started writing songs that were more personal and thought-provoking. Songs like That's the Way and Braun Y or Stomp showed a different side of him, full of stories and deep emotions. Jimmy Page gave Plant confidence and helped him create a style that mixed personal reflection with mythological ideas. Then there was the terrible accident in Rhodes on August 4th, 1975. Plant lost control of their car while they were on vacation with his family. He broke his ankle and arm in the crash, and Maureen's skull was broken, and she had other injuries as well. Luckily, their kids got away with only minor injuries. People thought Maureen wouldn't make it, but she did thanks to quick medical care and the band's means. Plant was hurt so badly that he will always have memory trouble. Everything changed after he got hurt. In a wheelchair for months, he got better over the course of 2 years. Led Zeppelin had to cancel a huge 33-date North American tour at that time. The tour included shows in Oakland, Kansas City, Atlanta, and the Rose Bowl in Pasadena. The band lost a lot of money because of the delays, which were terrible for fans. Plant had to get used to recording while sitting in a chair, which was even worse. When 1977 came around, Zeppelin came back to the U.S. for a huge tour. It was their first car in 2 years after Plant's major car. Fans couldn't wait any longer. Now there were 51 shows planned in big towns across the United States. Madison Square Garden and Chicago Stadium, which each had 15,000 to 20,000 seats, were both sold out right away. The tour made more than $5 million in advance sales. Plant got a call on July 23, 1977, while the band played at the Louisiana Superdome in New Orleans for 76,000 people. It was the call that would change his life forever. Maureen, his wife, called from England to tell him that their 5-year-old son Karak had suddenly become very sick. He was throwing up a lot, had a fever that reached 104 degrees, and was very weak, according to her. Plant was 4,000 miles away. On July 26th, 3 days later, Plant got the second call. Karak died in less than 48 hours after getting a rare virus that killed him. Plant was supposed to fly home that same day, but he missed seeing his son living by just a few hours. As he fell, he let out a terrible cry that could be heard all the way down the hotel hallway. The band quickly canceled the last 27 shows on the tour, which cost them about $4 million, and let down more than 800,000 people who had bought tickets. He locked himself in his hotel room for 6 days and wouldn't come out. His friends and crew made sure he ate and drank water every day. He dumped a lot of alcohol worth a lot of money down the drain, refused to take drugs, and told his manager Peter Grant that he didn't think he could ever act again. Their insurance company even tried to reject a $2.3 million claim, saying that it didn't cover family bereavement. This made the tragedy even worse. Plant spent the next year and a half living alone on his farm in Worcestershire. He lost more than 30 pounds and was only seen by close family and a few close friends. The backing of John Bonham was the only thing that kept him from giving up music for good. Plant later said that he was ready to quit everything and maybe even become a teacher until Bonham stepped in. Bonham even drove Plant around in his own six-door Mercedes sedan while wearing a driver's hat to make sure she felt safe and at ease. His wife Pat and him lived close by and stayed in touch with the Plant family, giving them more than just friendship. He thought that Led Zeppelin would have broken up in 1977 instead of 3 years later. The tragedy changed Plant a lot. People used to think of this man as the golden god of rock because of how crazy he was on stage and how strange his songs were. But now, he didn't care about fantasy worlds or rock star swagger. He wanted the truth. A lot of drugs stopped bothering him right away, and instead thought about how the people he loved really were. Afterward, he said that he had been thinking a lot about how important his life was and what it meant to be a dad and husband instead of a performance. All My Love is one of the most moving songs in rock history. It was written out of his sadness. It was an open letter to Carac from Plant. He said it was a way to honor the happiness his son had brought to him and his family. He recorded the vocals on a single tape, so he couldn't go back and hear the raw feeling again. The song was different from anything else Zeppelin had ever done. It was built around John Paul Jones's Yamaha GX1 keyboard, with Jimmy Page not contributing at all. It was one of only 2 Zeppelin songs that Plant did not co-write with Page. This shows how personal it was for Plant. He later said it was one of the best times for the band. It was easy to tell the difference when the band taped outside in Stockholm in late 1978. Jimmy Page and John Bonham were sober most of the time that Plant and Jones had to do most of the writing. The record, which went straight to #1 on the Billboard 200 and stayed there for weeks, was shaped by Plant's new point of view. It was hard for John Bonham to hide how much he drank by 1980. There were clear signs of trouble on Led Zeppelin's European tour in June and July of that year. He passed out in the middle of the 3rd song at a show in Nuremberg. The band said he had just eaten too much, but the news quickly found that alcohol was the real cause. He had to be taken to the hospital because what happened was so bad. After the fact, Rolling Stone said that he had recently beaten his heroin addiction and was also taking medicine for sadness and anxiety. He also drank a lot, which made the situation dangerous. People close to him knew he was going too far, but no one could stop him. What would become the worst day of his life began for him on September 24, 1980. Rex King, who works for Led Zeppelin, picked him up and took him to Bray Studios for practices. He asked to stop for food on the way. During that one meal, he drank 4 screwdrivers full of vodka. That's 16 shots of vodka, which is 400 to 560 milliliters of pure alcohol, all before noon. Later, Robert Plant remembers Bonham telling him, "I'm done playing the drums." At one point, Bonham told Plant, "When we get to the rehearsal, you play the drums and I'll sing." It was a strange and almost prophetic moment. He then tore off his car's sun visor and threw it out the window. The whole afternoon and night at the studio, he drank a lot, never giving his body a break. The next day, September 25th, terrible news came in. At 1:15 p.m., John Paul Jones and Benji Lefebvre, who was in charge of roads, found him dead at Jimmy Page's home in Windsor, Kluwer's old mill house. He went to bed about 13 hours ago after being turned over on his side by a staff member to help him breathe. After a month, the autopsy showed that he had drunk about 40 shots of vodka, which is about 1.0 to 1.4 liters of alcohol. 276 milligrams of alcohol per 100 milliliters of blood was found in him, which the doctor said was too high for life. He choked in his sleep because the booze had numbed his reflexes. He did not have any drugs in his body. He died when he was only 32 years old, leaving his wife and 2 kids behind. When he died, Led Zeppelin was over right away. The band made it public on December 4, 1980, 70 days after that they would not be going on without him. Robert Plant, Jimmy Page, and John Paul Jones, who were still in the band, said they couldn't play anymore out of respect for Bonham and his family. Their decision was one of a kind in rock history. The band turned down huge offers to get back together. They turned down $90 million each for a U.S. tour at one point. After many years, there were even reports that Richard Branson had made an offer of $800 million. This was the end of their planned North American tour, which was supposed to start in Montreal on October 17th. For more than 10 years, this was the age of rock music. Suddenly, it was over. Robert Plant felt like he could never fill the void left by Bonham's death at the age of 32. Phil Collins stepped in at that point. Collins told Plant, "The guy who sat behind you for all those years was my hero." Collins was already famous for his solo work. The first record by Plant was called Pictures at 11, and he played drums on 5 of the 8 songs. In 1983, he even went on tour with Plant. In the end, Plant said that Collins didn't really give him advice, but rather the support and motivation he needed to stand on his own again. Pictures at 11, which came out in the U.S. on June 25, 1982, and in the U.K. on July 2, 1982, showed that Plant could do well without Zeppelin. It got to number 2 in the U.K. and number 5 on the U.S. Billboard 200. In the U.S., Canada, and Australia, it won silver and gold awards. The album got good reviews, and Rolling Stone said that Plant made modest goals into a big deal. Before it shut down, it was the only solo record he ever put out on Led Zeppelin's Swan Song label. The next year, with Big Log, he had his first single hit. The song got as high as number 6 on the Billboard Top Tracks list and number 20 on the U.S. Billboard Hot 100. In the UK, it peaked at number 11. The story behind it was strange. While playing around with a TR-808 drum machine at Rockfield Studios, the players ran out of wood for the fire. Since they didn't have any tools, they slowly burned one end of the 15-foot log until it was hollow. The mystery title of the song comes from that strange moment. Storm Thorgerson directed the music video, which had creepy scenes from California and Nevada, such as Death Valley and Las Vegas, and helped Plant's new image stick. Plant's job was going well, but his personal life was falling apart. He got married to Maureen Wilson in 1968, but they split up in 1983. He became famous. Their 5-year-old son, Karak, died in 1977, and Led Zeppelin broke up in 1980. She was with him through all of it. But Plant's solo business, which included a lot of touring, became too much for him to handle. After the split, she dated Ian Hatton for a short time. In the early 1990s, he was the guitarist in Jason Bonham's band. Plant had a child with someone else after being with Maureen for years, but many people still think that Maureen will always be in his heart. Plant's biggest solo success was the record Now and Zen, which came out in 1988. It came out on February 29th and sold 3.1 million copies around the world. In the US, it hit number 6, and in the UK, it reached number 10. In 2001, the album had earned 3 platinum records in the United States. Jimmy Page was on 2 songs, Heaven Knows and Tall Cool One. Tall Cool One sampled classic Led Zeppelin sounds. By combining his old sound with his new sound, he did what many people thought was impossible and did very well after leaving Zeppelin. Plant had his 4th child, Jessie Lee, with Shirley Wilson in 1991. Shirley is the sister of Plant's ex-wife, Maureen. Fans were shocked by this strange family situation, which made the news. For Plant, the birth came after the terrible death of his son, Karak, many years before. Jessie Lee has decided to live a private life. He is now 34 years old, and fans only know a few random facts about him. Plant began dating American folk singer Patty Griffin in 2010. They had worked together in the band Joy. They split their time between Texas and England for a few years, but the changes in culture were too much for them. He said he was sad and sorry when they broke up in 2014. He made an album with Alison Krauss called Raising Sand in 2007. It was one of his most well-known works. No one thought the record would win any of the 5 Grammys it was nominated for in 2009, such as Record of the Year and Album of the Year. It was a surprise hit that proved Plant's music could still reach new audiences years after Led Zeppelin. Plant's life with his partner Don Angland is calmer now that he is 77 years old. They visit Worcestershire and take part in community events and watch local sports games. He is now a patron of a neighborhood charity that helps homeless people, and still plays shows with his band Saving Grace. His net worth is thought to be around $200 million, with a big chunk of that coming from Led Zeppelin's music, which still brings in $8 to $12 million a year. He chooses a simple life, living close to his roots while still making music, even though he has a lot of money.